Hi, this is Max Messenger with Linn Aerospace, and I'm back for the third installment of our Using Mission Planner series. This one is our second look at some advanced mission planning. So in the last video, we learned how to really make useful flights, takeoff, landing, and a grid to conduct mapping in there, and we talked about saving and loading those flight plans. So what we're going to look at now is making flight plans that have multiple grids. So we survey multiple distinct areas, overlapping grids, which we can use if we want extremely high quality reconstruction over an area, and then some other things like making approach patterns that we can reuse to make flight planning easier for us, and patrol flight plans, so ones that give us the flexibility to look around and survey an area. So the first thing I'm going to do is make an approach pattern that we will use for the rest of these videos. So you can see right now I have a blank screen, we have no flight plan, and all I'm going to do is make a simple approach. So we'll have a downwind leg, we'll fly out here, we'll have a point, come around, and land. And just like before, we will work our way backwards, changing these values to give us an acceptable glide slope. And yeah, there we go. So we're going to step down from an altitude of 150 meters. So you could use this on a flight plan that's cruising at 150 meters, or you could easily use this approach on a flight plan that's operating higher than that. If you put this into a flight plan that's operating lower, you may want to lower that first waypoint here just because it would be a waste to climb to 150 for the approach. But this will be good for pretty much all of our applications. So, okay. We have all of that made, and all we're going to do is save the waypoint file. So we'll call it Rams Approach, and I will put southeast because we are flying. The landing is toward the southeast. So you could make a second one of these that was Rams Approach Northwest, so that you can land in just about any wind conditions. But we'll save that. And now, if we clear this flight plan, I could make a flight plan, click a bunch of waypoints, and then if I want to land, all I have to do is right click, come down to File, Load, Save, and then we'll scroll down to Load and Append. Now this is important because Load WP File here and Load WP File here are going to overwrite the mission that's in here. But if we go to Load and Append, it's going to add that on to our existing flight plan. So I'll click here, it's going to ask if I want to reset home. We can click yes, and now we have our flight plan with waypoint 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and landing. Now, one thing you will notice, and this is a bug in Mission Planner, is that this has created waypoint number 6 right here, because you'll remember waypoint 5 was the last waypoint that I created manually, and when I do the load and append, for some reason it creates a waypoint over home. So I'm working on getting that resolved, but for now, just know that that happens, and we can just simply click delete, and now we're doing what we want to do, which is starting at waypoint 1, flying around to waypoint 5, then down to waypoint 6, and hitting the approach pattern, and coming in to land. So again, remember that final waypoint that it creates at the home position, and get rid of that when it creates it. It's not the end of the world if you don't. You're just going to fly out of your way going to that point and then fly back to the approach. Okay, now that's a good way to see how to make that approach, but it's not a very useful flight plan. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And it looks like it's moved our home position a little bit, and that's easy to fix. I can click right here on latitude, and it's going to say click on the map to set home, click OK, and then click right where we want home to be, and now we have moved the home position. Okay, so if we want to do multiple grids in a flight plan, that's a pretty simple thing to do. We're going to start off with a takeoff waypoint, just like normal. We'll make it to 60 meters at a pitch of 25, and then we will create our polygon. Just like before, we will map the same area that we've been flying in the past, and we will delete that. Just come down here to Auto WP, Survey Grid. All of this looks good for us. Click Accept. So now we have a grid, and let's say we also want to map this area over here. So that's simple enough to do. We can go to Draw Polygon, clear it, and then we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to go to Draw Polygon, Add Polygon Point. We're going to make our area, and then we will go back to Auto WP, Survey Grid. We get a grid that covers that area. We click Accept, and now we have two grids mapping in this area. And then if we want to come in and land, we can, just like last time, do a load and append, come down here to Ram's approach, and you can see we have this nice approach pattern. But again, we have this sort of nonsense waypoint that we want to get rid of. Okay, so that is good for this, but there's one problem here. If we look up here in the upper right at our ground elevation, down here we're on this flat field and it's all around 224 to 226 meters. But this is quite a hill over here. And now we're at 260 meters to 270 meters. So we need to account for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that grid I just made, and I'll delete the approach. So I'll just click these X's until this grid goes away. Okay, so now we're back to just our one grid, and we still have our polygon here for the area that we want to map. But what we want to do is account for the change in elevation between these two places. So we will click on this Verify Height checkbox. What Verify Height is going to do, it's kind of a nonsense name. I don't know why it's called that. More accurately, it would be something like height compensation or elevation compensation. What it's going to do is it's going to add, every waypoint will be created 150 meters above terrain instead of 150 meters above home. When this is not checked, every waypoint is 150 above home. When this is checked, we're 150 above terrain. So now, if I go to Auto WP and I make this grid, we can see None of these are at 150. They're all higher. And that's because we're compensating for that elevation change. So if we go up here to waypoint 23 right here, which is at 182 meters, we can see up in the upper right that the ground elevation is 257. So if it's 182, that means we're 32 meters above home. And sure enough, 257 up here is right about 32 meters above home at 225. So it's compensating for that difference in elevation. So that way the aircraft maintains a constant altitude above ground, not above home. And this is really important if you have a lot of terrain change in your scene, because if you have, let's say if we are flying a flight plan at 150 meters and we have more than 150 meters of terrain change in our flight plan, that means that we run a serious risk of flying into terrain and crashing the aircraft. So be sure to keep track of what your terrain looks like in an area and ensure that you don't come into any conflicts with that terrain. Okay, so there's our multiple grids. Now we're going to look at how to make an overlapping grid. So let's say this area up here is of really high interest to us. Something here is really important, and we want a really good quality imagery of it. So what we're going to do is, with this polygon still here, we'll right click again, go to Auto WP, Survey Grid, and we get exactly the same thing we had before. But what we want to do is turn this by 90 degrees, so that will put us at 262. Nope. That would be 232. There we go. And we want to change our altitude. So typically we want to fly either 30 meters higher or lower in the perpendicular grid. So by changing the altitude, we get a different perspective from the camera that gives us a higher quality reconstruction. So let's make this 120. Ooh. And you can see we get more lines for that, but that's okay. This is still a short flight plan. We hit accept, and now we have this crazy cross-hatched grid pattern, but from this we will get a really nice reconstruction of every little detail in there. And you can see, even with these two grids, one of which is double covered, we're still only 10.8 kilometers in total flight distance. So this is a trivial amount of distance for us to cover with something like the Kestrel. So not a problem there. Okay. Finally, I will show you how I make a flight plan for patrols. So what I mean by a patrol is where we want to take off, we want to control it manually in the air to fly to certain areas based on video that we're seeing. So maybe we are watching the video feed from the aircraft, we're flying along a feature, maybe a road or a river, and we see something of interest and we want to be able to turn and fly toward that thing of interest. So I'll clear this mission and I will clear this polygon, and we're back to home. So as with every flight plan, we have to start with a takeoff, 60 meters, 25 degrees, and then I am going to right click, scroll down to loiter, and click on loiter forever. So this loiter unlimited command is just that. It will loiter at this point indefinitely. So if we just flew this flight plan and gave no other input, the aircraft would take off, fly to this loiter point, and circle there until it ran out of power. But that's not what we're going to let it do. What we're going to do after this loiter point is then load and append the approach. So we have Rams approach southeast, which is good, and we get rid of this point. So now we have the loiter, and it seems this. So another bug in Mission Planner is that when we load and append a flight plan, it removes our takeoff point. So now you can see loiter unlimited is waypoint 1. So load and append adds this nonsense waypoint, and it deletes our takeoff. So if we click on point number 1, so we could right click here and click takeoff and then scroll it all the way up through here, or we could click on waypoint, or right click, click insert waypoint. We'll change this to after 0. So we make a new waypoint 1, we change this to takeoff, we change our pitch angle to 25, our altitude to 60, and we change the position to zeros, and now we have a takeoff point just like it's always been there. So either way, you can do the insert waypoint, or you can just right click, click takeoff, and scroll it all the way up. Okay, so the way we use this flight plan is that we will allow it to take off, fly to this loiter point, and when it reaches this loiter point in the flight data screen, we're going to change mode to cruise. Now what cruise is going to do for us is maintain heading, altitude, and airspeed. So it's just going to fly straight and level. And then if we push right or left on the roll stick, it is going to turn the aircraft right or left. So that way we can fly in a straight line. If we want to follow a feature, we can push right and left to follow that feature. Like if we want to fly along this river, if we see something we want to fly to, we can just turn toward it, fly to it, look at it, and when we're done, we can just, in our flight data screen, click auto, which will return it to that loiter point, and then we can just set our waypoint number. So right here, this drop-down box gives us a list of all the waypoints. So if we were connected to an aircraft, you would see a number for each waypoint, and we would select the number that puts us on the approach pattern and click Set WP. So in this case, if we're flying back from our cruise toward waypoint 2, if we want to go into the approach, we would set the waypoint to 3. It would skip over to fly to 3 and make the approach. So we would just click right here, scroll to 2, click it, and click Set WP. Now it's going to give me an error because it's not connected to an aircraft and it can't set the waypoint. But that's okay. Yes, the command failed to execute. So that is it for flight planning. The best way to learn this stuff is really to just do it and do a lot of it. You will become more comfortable with doing these sorts of things once you have done them many, many times, and it's important to just have a lot of practice working on this stuff. Okay, so that's it for mission planning, and next time we are going to put it all together. We're going to fly one of these flight plans that we've created, and we'll be working with that flight data screen in real time and looking at all of the functionality that we get in the flight data screen. So, but for now, that's it, and thank you for watching.